Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome to Live Weather Impact Plus. I don't know if we ever decided yesterday, Lily, what the name was because I just introduced it as Live Weather Impact, but here we are. Today was officially the hottest day of the year so far. The actual air temperature only got to 98. I say only because, we were looking for that target of 100, but hey, no complaints when it's cooler than expected. But the heat index did unfortunately hit 105, which is the threshold for a heat advisory. It was the forecast for today as well. So very warm, very humid. Good news is that we only have one more day where we want folks to stay especially weather aware, weather alert, and that is tomorrow. And it's actually going to be a bit of a different day than today, more of a 1-2 punch, as we actually are going to be tracking heat first and then storms. First, we're going to talk about today. I just mentioned this a second ago, but 98 for the second day in a row, making it tied again for the hottest day of the year so far. I'm still saying today was hotter just because of the fact that the heat index was hotter than the 101 we had yesterday. Tomorrow, rinse, repeat, we're going to probably hit 98 again, and then we're starting to see a more typical classic summer-like pattern for Thursday, Friday, and heading into the weekend. Right now, it still feels like 103. We will likely still feel in the triple digits until we get to sunset. Typically, this time of year when we have heat this high, we're sitting at right around 99, if not 100, just before sunset. Then we will start to see temperatures drop off. Unfortunately, with a low temperature tonight of 77, we'll probably still feel like the 80s all throughout the night. I wanted to show the peak heat index for some of our local areas today. So again, we had 105 there in Charlotte. I'm actually going to take this off for a second, do this manually, because I want to show folks in Chirac. There was a certain point just after 2:30 that we were near 110. Some of the highest numbers in Lincolnton earlier, 107. We had the same there for Rock Hill and over toward Albemarle. So even if you didn't hit that 107, 108, 110 in Charlotte, we still felt it in some of our more rural communities. And I do get questions sometimes about the fact that we technically have the urban heat island effect here in Charlotte, but sometimes the heat index is hotter in other areas. Well, normally the urban heat island effect is mostly for the city center, which is not where the data comes from. That comes from Charlotte Douglas International, which I know we talked about a little bit yesterday. So yes, the urban heat island effect does affect the air temperature, impact the air temperature and the heat index, but more rural communities oftentimes can be impacted, especially south and southeast of Charlotte, based on where the positioning of the high is. So just be mindful of that. Again, tomorrow we're looking at 105, 104 for the highest heat index, but that doesn't mean some of those outlying areas couldn't once again have higher numbers than what we see in the Queen City. We were not completely storm-free today, but the storms only impacted the mountains. We actually had a severe thunderstorm warning earlier for the higher little tip there of Avery County, just near the Beach Mountain area and north and west of there. But now that's pushing off into Tennessee. We have some lightning strikes here, but again, not a lot of impacts in our actual viewing area. Although sometimes just over the border in Wilkes County in North Carolina, over in Tennessee, some of those areas near Bristol can sometimes get WCNC, and maybe they have WCNC Plus downloaded, so we're still going to talk about them nonetheless. No storms for the rest of today, at least for the Charlotte area, but tomorrow, this is kind of where the 1-2 punch comes in. We'll still see heat index values around 105, and then just around 2 o'clock, we'll start to see a few thunderstorms pop up. Now, a lot of these model runs earlier today, yesterday, were very, very aggressive with the sea breeze collision. Now, I think they're kind of coming more so back to reality because we have not had storms for the past few days, so the flooding risk won't be quite as high, but also just the fact that with the heat and humidity and the high pressure overhead, I just wouldn't expect that much storm activity. I was talking with this earlier to Lily as well, our heat weather intern. Yes, could eat my words, but at least for now, I would expect that scattered storms will be possible, but again, not necessarily to the higher threshold. I say that because I know there's a lot of data that gets posted randomly with just 1 or 2 runs. And so at this point, I do not think we're going to be quite that high when it comes to rain and storm potential, but yes, we will have some nonetheless. So that's 4 o'clock. Here's 5, 6, and 7, 8. Again, a few more storms possible by 8, and then after that we are largely dry. More of a rinse repeat forecast on Thursday in terms of a few isolated storms after 12 o'clock, but again, nothing to the threshold of what we had a few weeks ago when we had that widespread flash flooding with the training storms. We could have a few heavy downpours, a few areas of lightning strikes, but again, nothing to that threshold. So heat number 1 impact tomorrow. With the storms, gusty winds near 60 miles an hour will be second, and then we will have the risk for some small hail. Again, flooding risk is there just if the same side kind of sees that same storm sit over there for long periods of time, but I would not expect that to be a high risk by any stretch of the imagination. Here's the 3-day heat impact, of course, put out by the National Weather Service. Again, today, tomorrow, we're looking at major to extreme impacts, and you can see how quickly that drops off as we get toward Thursday. So here's the latest 5-day forecast. 105 tomorrow, still under a heat advisory. We slowly drop down to the upper 90s to near 100 as we get closer to the weekend. We're going to take a quick look at that 7-day forecast, and then we're going to talk about something else that happened today, which was something happening in the tropics. So there's 98 tomorrow. Weather alert still in effect because we have that heat index near 105, and then the secondary risk of storms. But you can see the rest of the week heading into the weekend is more typical pattern for this time of year. So let's transition to tropical weather. So 2025 Atlantic hurricane season did pop off on June 1st. There are often times where we will see an early season storm. That did not happen this year. There were many, many years, a few years ago, that we did have early season storms to where the NWS, NHC, World Meteorological Organization was thinking, maybe we should start it on May 15th. But it's just the fact that most of the time that doesn't happen, so they're going to stick with June 1st. So June 1st through November 30th, we have the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. Andrea is officially taken. We had a tropical storm that formed earlier today. It is way out in the center part of the Atlantic Ocean and is no impact not only to the United States, but no impact to land as well. One important thing I do want to point out here is I had some viewers commenting on a post I made about this the other day on Facebook, asking why the WMO names storms that aren't going to impact the U.S. land in general. Well, the answer is because the storm happened, whether or not it impacts us. It's like the old saying, if a tree falls in the forest, does nobody hear it if nobody's there? The storm still formed, whether it impacts land or not. It can also impact things like upwelling. So when a storm moves over warm ocean waters, it can bring in the cooler water from below. So we also want to just be aware of that, when it comes to future forecasting of storms. While I don't think upwelling would be a major issue out here in the central part of the Atlantic, it is still something that we, of course, track. And eventually, sometimes tropical systems can become extratropical, post-tropical, and eventually can impact somebody else. So nonetheless, first storm can be crossed off for the Atlantic hurricane season. I do just want to remind folks that your average for named storms is 14, average hurricanes is 7, average major is 3, and NHC, Colorado State, as well as NC State all have an above average hurricane season expected because of that teeter-totter back and forth between La Nada and La Nina. Right now, CSU does have about a 35 to 46% chance that we could see a hurricane impact and or make landfall along the Carolina coast. But I know Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich talks about this a lot. We talked about it before his hurricane presentation a few weeks ago. Oftentimes here in the Charlotte area, we are more impacted by storms that make landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast of Florida or along the Big Bend. And this year, CSU calls for a 65% chance of that. So again, just things that our team continues to monitor as we get further and further into the hurricane season. So recap of what happened today. We got a lot of heat. Did we hit 100? The answer is no. 98 for the second day in a row. Still, again, under a weather alert tomorrow, still under a heat advisory. That is for heat number 1, then gusty winds for storms, and then that small hail potential. Again, hurricane season forecast expected to be above average. First storm of 2025. And that's about all, at least for now, the local weather that we do have. Now, as we get closer to tomorrow, we again mentioned the fact that we do have a lot of heat. Brad just sent a message out. He is just the best. He's always keeping a close eye on what's going on. Okay,
the man is truly never off.
I know, seriously. Literally. I guess he's technically at our hurricane, at an AMS conference. So I guess technically, he is still working, I guess, for lack of a better term, but that is still interesting nonetheless. Okay, so we're gonna switch gears here. In just a second, I gotta pull up this thing that James sent me a few weeks ago. There we go.
I can watch the radar up, Brittany, while you're loading that up to show you some of those continued storms. Did you see just outside Asheville, there was a severe thunderstorm warning?
Yeah, actually one has been sitting over us for what feels like forever.
Yeah.
So annoying. Okay, all right, we're popped up.
I will let curious viewers know that message from Brad was telling us that Columbia, South Carolina experienced a lightning strike, even though it's not raining there. Bolt from the blue.
Yes, it was. And actually, Becca Bertzel did a story about that earlier on lightning safety. It does seem like the data says that lightning safety is getting better. People are paying attention more. I would love to think that's the National Weather Service's when thunder roars, move indoors, that people are paying attention to more. But nonetheless, it is getting better. I will be clear, I did not see this data myself. But the old data said that lightning strike deaths, it was normally, what was it, 80% men, 20% women. Chris Mulcahy told me that number has gone down to 77% men and 23% women. And so he looked at me the other day and he said, "We're getting better." I said,
We heard
okay.
you loud and clear.
Yeah, but I mean, I hope that's the case, but deaths in general are going down, so very thankful for that.